Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov gang. We're back with our second episode with Steve Emerson, the leading authority on domestic Islamic terrorist attacks, the world's leading authority on domestic Islamic terrorist networks and the most fearless reporter in the world. He is the founder and executive director of the Investigative Project on Terrorism, the world's most comprehensive data center on radical Islamic terrorist groups. Stephen, welcome back to the Glazov gang.
Nice to be with you, Jamie.
Stephen, one of the great threats to our society, our culture, and our country, CAIR, the Council of American Islamic Relations, supposed to be some kind of civil rights group or whatever they pretend that they are. They've run into quite a bit of trouble lately in terms of their funding and in terms of some of their statements on the Nairobi attack. Tell us a little bit about CAIR and some of the troubles they're running into.
Well, first of all, CAIR was created by Hamas in 1994, and there is indisputable evidence of that by a FBI wiretap meeting that was held in Philadelphia in 1993, where Hamas leaders discussed the fact that Hamas as itself wasn't selling that well. It had a bad reputation in the United States as a terrorist group, and they decided, and this was all wiretapped and translated by the FBI, that they needed another group that would be a, quote, political civil rights advocacy group. Those are the words they used. And they would use deception. They quoted, the Chinese philosopher, Sun Tzu, who talked about deception, that war is deception. That was a quote that we have in our new documentary. And they created within 1 year an organization called the Council on American Islamic Relations, which the FBI in the last 5 years has formally designated as a front for Hamas. And yet, the FBI IG, Inspector General, just issued a report within the last week showing that FBI, several offices and bureaus of the FBI, including that in L.A., run by the SAC, the special agent in charge, actually issued directives to their own agents saying, disregard the orders from FBI headquarters not to deal with CAIR as a Hamas group. We have our own mission here. And in fact, FBI offices have dealt with CAIR, as has Department of Homeland Security. The White House, in the last 5 years, invited more than 80 members of CAIR to have secret meetings at the White House and sent abroad more than a dozen members of CAIR, a Hamas front group, as emissaries of the U.S. government. Recently, they've gotten into trouble because of their financing, millions of dollars of which come from Qatar and Persian Gulf countries, which they did not report on their annual tax return. They've issued statements in Arabic, which we found. We also found a secret letter that they sent to Gaddafi 3 years ago asking for money in exchange for doing his lobbying. They did the same with Sudan's Bashir, who, as you know, has been indicted for war crimes and genocide. They have been a regular attendee at the UN General Assembly for the last 7 years with Ahmadinejad. We posted a picture on our website today of the head of CAIR, Nihad Awad, with Ahmadinejad. So it's catching. Their past is catching up. And yet, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Homeland Security, Department of Justice, Hollywood continue to rely on this organization that is no different at all, Jamie, than the Ku Klux Klan.
Steve, here's another thing. What just happened in Kenya, CAIR came out and pretended in some way that it denounced it, but as you explained on your blog and at the Investigative Project, they kind of left the details out. They said, oh, we denounced this attack, but they didn't denounce the group. They didn't denounce the Islamic theology behind it. Tell us a bit about what it selectively omits.
This is part of their mendacious deception, which is they say they're against terrorism, and if they're interviewed by the New York Times will quote them by saying, CAIR says we are against terrorism. But they don't follow up with the second set of questions, which should be, do you condemn Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda? Do you condemn Al-Shabaab? Do you condemn and acknowledge the existence of radical Islam? Because if they ask them those questions, they would say, no, Hamas is not a terrorist group. No, Islamic Jihad is not a terrorist group. No, Hezbollah is an armed resistance group engaged fully in their rights to destroy and kill the state of Israel. they would say that the use of the term radical Islam is part of Islamophobia. In fact, Nihad Awad tweeted in Arabic, equating those who are, he called, promoters of Islamophobia with the terrorists that actually killed the mass civilians in Nairobi. So their statements speak for themselves, Jamie.
Yeah, Steve,
and what's surprising is the extent to which we get deceived.
And I'm still to read anywhere where Islamophobes are running around in a mall shooting people and making them recite some kind of anti-Islamic prayer. Steve, let me ask you this. Is it not true that 3 terrorists were actually American teenagers recruited by this terrorist organization, and there was an individual, Abdirajak Bihi, if I'm pronouncing his name right, that was actually trying to stop al-Shabaab's recruitment of Americans. CAIR shut that down, and now it's made the statement that it's not important that these Islamists are recruiting Americans in our society. This is shameless. And Steve, if CAIR actually stopped the recruitment, does not it have blood on its hands when these people killed people in Nairobi?
Well, indirectly, I mean, they don't do the actual recruitment. What they do,
but they stopped the effort to stop recruitment.
The Somali American parents from holding a rally denouncing CAIR for its efforts to allow Somali American kids to volunteer for jihad in al-Shabaab. That's number one. Number two, CAIR promotes the very conspiratorial agenda or conspiratorial mantras that there's a war against Islam, that the U.S. and the Jews and the Christians are engaged in this war against Islam, that the FBI has falsely imprisoned and convicted dozens of Islamic terrorists. And in fact, right after 9/11, they denied that Muslims were behind 9/11. They said there was a plot by Israel. So they engage in all these conspiratorial phobias that fuel Islamic terrorism, because the number one common denominator that actually incentivizes and mobilizes and instills the notion that jihad has to be carried out is the belief that there's a war against Islam, which doesn't exist. It is a contrived, incendiary, paranoid belief promoted by Islamists, designed to motivate them to carry out jihad. So indirectly, they are responsible for the very attacks that we are combating, and yet they're praised by, in fact, in your state of California, believe it or not, at the University of Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley, CAIR has its own department, paid for by the Regents of California.
Stephen, tell us this. Barack Obama, Eric Holder, these are not the enemies of CAIR. These are the friends of CAIR. They embrace CAIR. And yet this is an Islamist front group, other Islamist front groups. They've purged our intelligence agency manuals of the words and the labels that we can even use to fight our enemy. Stephen, let me ask you this. Who is Obama? Who is Eric Holder?
Eric Holder is a hitman, that's one, and a thug, and corrupt, and should be indicted, not only for contempt of Congress and for other actions he's conducted, but also for quashing indictments of Islamic terrorist financiers.
When you say he's a hitman, what do you mean?
He's doing the bidding of President Obama.
Okay.
It's not like when Eric Holder actually assumed office, in the beginning, friends of mine who had worked with Holder during the Clinton administration, when he was number 2 next to Janet Reno, said he was a decent guy and said he would call shots as they are and wouldn't do the political bidding and politicize the Department of Justice. Well, that's exactly what he did. He has refused to use the term radical Islam. He has stricken the word jihad from indictments. He has done out. His own assistant attorney generals have denied that Nidal Hassan, the convicted killer from Fort Hood, was motivated by radical Islam. Instead, he was charged with workplace violence, as you know. So he is a hitman and somebody who deserves to go to jail. And information about his corruption is going to come out in the next few months. and it'll be pretty shocking.
Stephen, let me tell you this. Why you mean a lot to me is I come from the Soviet Union, from dissident parents. We came to America. I love this country. And this country is under attack, and people like you are defending this country. So I would think that you would be on the shows of Chris Matthews, Pierce Morgan, Anderson Cooper, that they would be giving you so much time on the airwaves. Why are they not inviting you, a defender of the United States of America?
Because those shows, Chris Matthews, MSNBC, CNN, are in bed with the Islamists. Let me say it plainly, Jamie. They're in bed with the Islamists. They do the bidding of the Islamists. Do they do it out of a belief that the United States should be destroyed? No, I don't think so. I think they do it out of either a naivete or an ideological belief that somehow the Islamists are victims. That's the way they hide and legitimize themselves. They're victims of hate crimes, and therefore they're an ethnic group that is oppressed, and therefore Steve Emerson, who they oppose as being an Islamophobe, a term, by the way, which is designed solely to intimidate critics of, like myself or Dan Pipes or yourself or David Horowitz, of radical Islam, not Islam itself, a term that was contrived for that purpose only. And that term has now entered our lexicon. At the same time, the term radical Islam has exited our lexicon, and in fact, radical Islam has exited the themes of major Hollywood movies, as evidenced by the fact that 80% of Hollywood studios now vet their scripts with Muslim Brotherhood front groups to make sure that they're not offending any radical Islamists.
Stephen Emerson, let me ask you this in terms of the picture that you're painting for us. I mean, it's very hard to retain hope. I mean, somebody like me, I believe we fight till our dying breath. But at the same time, when we see in Nairobi, when we see the Muslim terrorists saying to the people, say a Muslim prayer, and if they can't say a Muslim prayer, they kill them, and then yet the rest of the world and our media say that it has nothing to do with Islam. President Obama, the administration, turning a blind eye to the genocide against Christians.
Well, it's worse than that, Jamie. Egyptian Copts, Christians who were there since the days of Christ, more than 100,000 of them have left Egypt in the last 2 years, mostly under Morsi when he was in power because of the persecution. And the United States State Department under Hillary Clinton agreed secretly to deny asylum to tens of thousands of Christians who were seeking asylum from persecution in Egypt, because Morsi asked her to do that because having all of these asylum Christians coming to the U.S. wasn't going to paint a good picture for Egypt.
Absolutely.
And so if you look at the stats last year, only 819 Christians got asylum, yet 20,000 applied for it.
Stephen, so in this situation, in this horrible situation where I believe, and I think you believe, that we actually have the enemy controlling the White House, controlling the media, let's end on a personal note. How do you find the courage, how do you find the energy to keep going in these dire circumstances?
Well, first of all, I sign all my emails, we are doomed. You know, you have to have gallows humor. Number two, just because I've had assassination threats, you know, has caused more personal discomfort to me, forcing me to live undercover. But thank God I have staff willing to start my car in the morning. That's a joke.
But Stephen,
okay?
Wait, I want to give you major props. I respect you so much because there are...
Look, the bottom line is, I can't give up, Jamie. People who want to kill me, yes. But you know, when that first assassination threat came in 1996, I was given 3 options. I was told, 1, I could quit what I was doing, and they would leave me alone. 2, I could try to enter the witness security program. Or 3, I could change professions. I wasn't going to let them shut me down. I wasn't going to enter the witness security program. They weren't going to win this way. Listen, I don't think that I am a brave person. I think I'm only doing my job, Jamie. And if I look good, it's only because others are not doing their job. It's incumbent upon all of us. You do your job. David, your boss, David Horowitz, has inspired an entire generation of people.
Okay, 1 second. Stephen, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Stephen, tell us this with your final comment. What is on the horizon if things do not change dramatically very quickly?
We will see our freedoms challenged. our freedom of speech. We will see our intellectual freedoms curtailed. We will see more bombings like the Boston Marathon bombing. Our physical danger is increasing because of the refusal to tackle radical Islam, to treat it as a terrorist problem. And our basic freedoms that underpin the very greatness of this country, the intellectual freedom, the separation of church and state, the notions that it's civil jurisprudence, not the Sharia, that should rule our country. These are all disintegrating before our very eyes. And in 10 years, you want to see the future? Look at Europe. Look at what's going on. Every day there's a cell being arrested. Sharia courts are recognized in Britain. The 200,000 Jews in Sweden have left because they can't be protected from the Muslim influx. So if you want to see what the United States could become, you already could see it by looking across the ocean.
Stephen Emerson, thank you very much for joining the Glazov gang. Please keep up the fight and keep the faith, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jamie.
Good night.
Good night.
And we'll see you again next week on the Glazov gang.